Live from Press Play, this is Office Hours on releasing good music on a bad budget.
Hey guys, thanks for coming. My name is Ben, and welcome to Office Hours. This is a monthly series that we do to talk about topics around the music industry for young artists. It's a collaboration between the Rising Artists Foundation and UMAW. The Rising Artists Foundation, which I'm a co-founder of, is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we give grants and education and resources to young artists around the country. And UMAW is a member-funded and run organization that's working to organize music industry laborers to fight for a more just industry and to join with the other workers in the struggle for a better society. I guess a little bit about myself. I've been an artist manager for about 13 years, run a couple record labels, and then I started the Rising Artists Foundation about in 2019. So we're here with some amazing people who can introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Robbie, Robbie Gong. I'm the Director of Artists and Industry Relations at BeatBread. So we're a financial funding company that funds artists, labels, distributors, and yeah.
Hello, I'm Moses Sumney. I'm a singer, songwriter, multidisciplinary artist, and I've been working with Rising Artists Foundation for a little bit. And I put out records.
Hey, my name is Brandon Sánchez. I co-run a label called Human Pitch for the last decade, as well as another label and club night here in New York City called Slink. And I'm also an artist manager at ATC Management and a DJ producer as well.
Hi everyone, I am Fabienne Leys. Everyone calls me Fab. I am a longtime manager of artists, producers, and writers, based here in New York now, also with the lovely ATC Management, and very excited to be here today.
As Brandon, you run a label with, a small independent label. Like, I guess from the label perspective, when an artist is putting out a release on your label, how do you help them think through this question of like, okay, here's the budget. How do how should they spend it?
At the very base level, we should be creating the art itself. So first, funds should be allocated to making sure that the music is the best it can sound, the artwork is the best it can look. How are we just creating the work that is going to be shared by the artist and the label? But it's like, what are we actually using the money for? And it's usually to pay labor, to pay people to make things, help create things. So I've never done anything I do in the music industry by myself. I truly think it takes a village to create art. It takes a community to create art and to listen to art and to accept art. So I've always done my label with friends. I've released music with my friends. I've created things with my friends. And I think especially for a small independent label, working with independent artists, thinking of it more as like a cooperative instead of like a company. It's like, how can we, if we don't have the monetary funds to fund this art project, how can I look to my community to see who can help me create artwork in exchange for, other creative services? Like my partner at Human Pitch, he's a producer and musician himself, so he mixes and masters the records, so we don't have to spend money that way. A lot of the times we're working with, he makes art himself, so he'll make the artwork for the releases. So I do think it's about being resourceful within your community too, and if you are an independent artist, looking at the people around you and asking yourself, can I collaborate with my friends to put this out together in a way?
Yeah, so I guess just to add on to what Brandon was saying as well, and probably most of you in the audience who maybe have already released music independently or just created it independently, feedback, you definitely lean into your community and do favorable kind of, I think, partnership deals to save money on just the A&R of putting it all together. So in my experience as a manager working with independent artists for over a decade at this point, it is a lot about pulling favors. And I'm not saying like everyone in the room should just go ask people to work for free forever, but you know, you can always do a master share back-end deal once something is independently released on DSPs, you know, so the producers, if you collaborate with other musicians, you can get, you know, they can kind of make back, have a little ownership of what they put forward. I'm less inclined to nowadays advise somebody independently to just come out the gate, like handing somebody 10 grand to do PR. I think publicity is something that is important to furthering your visibility as an artist, but it's something that maybe should come a little bit later on, because you do want to develop your own community with your fans, and that's also something to be mindful of if you're a live performer. So if you're, you know, spending so much time on the creative, you want to make sure that that's also translating when you eventually are playing shows. So I would say probably investing in a bit of digital ads, things of that nature to promote the music itself, great visuals, and hopefully being able to pay your band if you go out with a band and put on a show that people want to come back to see. I think those are some of the things that immediately come to mind on the independent side of it all.
Totally. Well, so that, I guess that leads to the question of like, when, you know, if this is a very early release for you, if it's your first EP, your first album, something like that, like how do all of you guys think about what returns are you looking for? Are you looking for, you know, just to get some people to listen? Are you going to expect any streaming returns? Are you like, what does success look like, and how can that also help shape the budget conversation? I guess that could be any of you.
I feel like every artist has their, to quote one of the people we work with, has their own why. So when you identify as an artist what it is that you are trying to achieve, everybody has their, it's subjective success. Like Moses, I don't want to speak for you, you can probably speak to what your vision is as an artist and where you're trying to exist and expand in the world. Some folks may just want to be successful touring artists who sell a lot of merch and they're perfectly happy with that. Some people may want to, you know, be at the top of the Hot 100 and do all of it and be a huge pop star. So I think it's just setting certain goals that are realistic along the way and maybe working backwards from that. But yeah, everybody has different benchmarks for success, for sure.
Yeah, for me, in the early days and even now, I think the return is almost never financial, unfortunately. It's more about raising awareness about an important cause, which is me. And it's about audience. It's about finding the audience and then building the audience and being able to create a culture around the art that you make. And resources for me have almost always gone into that. Every time I'm releasing a project, I feel like, okay, I'm re-identifying who the audience is, trying to reach them, trying to bring them in closer, trying to build a world for them to understand. And I think that's the best way for a new artist to expend their resources.
When we give out advances, we are agnostic in that, like, here's your money, you know, you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to go spend it on a new car, that's your prerogative. We don't suggest that. And we find that the success stories, you know, as you guys said, success looks different for everyone. But the successful, you know, artists and managers and labels that we work with, we find that whenever they come to us and the initial conversation is like, hey, we want an advance for marketing, we want an advance to make this music video, we need to pay producers, we need, actually, you know, there's just a plan laid out of like what they need the money for. And that's where, you know, we find the most success, because we know that they're not overspending, that, you know, they want the money not just to have in their pockets, but to invest in themselves and grow their business. So yeah, so I think that's what like we see success as, where, you know, it's when you're an artist, you're essentially a small business in and of itself. So just investing wisely and just growing with any advances or any money that you have available.
As you're making your way through the industry from the ground up, it's definitely something now where people are much more respected for going the indie route. So I'm very pro that personally. I think ownership as an artist and a creator is key. And when you realize how much a major label deal can take from an artist, and then what they could make if they just owned it themselves. I mean, again, there's nothing better than owning the art that you've put out into the world. You do have to make some money back at some point, so you just have to always be mindful of, where you're at in the marketplace in terms of your value and weighing that against what your potential distro or label partner is willing to come to the table and invest in you and having success together. So you have to look at it as a true partnership and realize, okay, if I only want to give them 15%, then I can't expect them to hand me this massive, blank check if I'm not coming in with proven success already, right? Like everyone kind of has to hedge their bets in a way. So you do want to be a good partner on both sides. Not every label is the bad guy, so to speak.
So it's come up a couple times that artists have to think of themselves as a small business. And I guess, Moses, this one will be for you. How do you maintain your creative integrity while also thinking about budgets and marketing plans and releasing independently? Are you able to compartmentalize those things?
I am largely able to compartmentalize, but I think every artist has to measure for themselves what their ability to compartmentalize is, because the more time that you spend thinking about administrative or financial things, for a lot of people, the more it takes away from your ability to be creative. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day. So I think you do have to accept that as a small business owner, a good amount of your time is gonna end up going to doing business things. But then depending on who you are, that can drain you creatively. Like, it's not necessarily an equal balance of like, I'll do 3 hours on emails and looking at budgets and then 5 hours working on music, because 5 of those hours might be spent sitting and staring at your computer or at your instrument and being like, why is nothing coming out? And sometimes nothing's coming out because you just spent 3 hours looking at emails. And so it's tricky for me.
Arguing with your label.
Or you're pissed because it's like your label just told you that you can't do this thing, or why did you do that? Or your manager told you that, like, this thing and you took it personally. Like, as a creative person, you just process information in sometimes irrational ways. I feel fortunate that I'm very able now, especially, to switch. Like, I've been, self-releasing for the past 3 years. I've also been managing myself for the past 3 years, which I don't necessarily recommend. But my brain, I'm able to be like, yeah, did you send the email? Did you get the new proofs? Oh, for maybe it's ADHD. But I think the best thing that you can do, if you are able to, is to share. And like you said, like, no one can do everything by themselves. And so if you have the privilege of being able to have any sort of team that you can delegate to, or you can share duties with, or even people who can advise you, the best thing to do is bring in someone who can take on some of those duties and give you more space to be creative.
And so
one quick thing I just want to chime in on with the advanced conversation. Aside from like that money having to be made back, always account for the IRS. I always have to say that for people that are like, oh yeah, I just got this fat check and I'm going to spend the whole thing. It's like, you're going to have to pay taxes on that.
And it's also, I also think a common...
So the number isn't always the number.
Right. And also, I think when people see in advance, whether that's, from a loan financial company or a label or a distro thing, they I think people need to be reminded that it's a loan to you. It is not a check. And I think that's commonly sort of glossed over sometimes, especially when you're just starting. You know, it's not free money they're giving you. It needs to be recouped.
The longer you can hold out and build your own leverage, the better deal you'll probably get long term. But there are also solutions for somebody to just administer your publishing if you're self-releasing music. Quite a few, in fact, that don't take 50% of your copyright for the life of the copyright. So, yeah, my artists are all signed to admin deals as well, so it's a much more favorable split. I think you're also in an admin deal too, because in that way you get your copyright back, your catalog back.
There's a lot of times where our data spits out a number, and it's like, this is what we project you to, your streaming income to be over the next 3-5 years. And a lot of times it's lower than what the artist or what the manager is like, no, like I have 500,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Like, no, this equates to that. And it's like, yeah, but our data is showing, or our system is showing that a lot of those plays come from passive playlists. A lot of that comes from discovery mode. And, you guys have talked about building your community and building those super fans, and the data will show that, where it's like, I'm sure you guys all seen your back ends on DSPs, like, these are the people that listen X amount of times, or, this song is played by X amount of times by the same people. So I think I wouldn't really call it a red flag, but I think it's just like back to building that real strong community and that real fan base. It'll show in your streams, because those are kind of like the evergreen songs where it's like, okay, that projection of streams, which equates to income, it's gonna stay flat or steadily rise for over time, and not just like kind of peak and valley, which is really hard to kind of bank on when you're thinking about like long-term financial stability from your streaming income.
Yeah, I think that some people can see some random kind of like TikTok moment or something like that, and interpret that as, oh, I have this much stability moving forward. I have this many monthly listeners, but those aren't, for the most part, those aren't fans who are supporting you, and supporting your career. That's very kind of like a blip in the numbers.
And a lot of times we see sometimes where it's like they featured on a bigger artist song, which is great, but I think a big focus should be is like, okay, how do you then convert those fans over to your fans to keep them long term? And so, again, it's not like a red flag, but just more, how do you build like a real steady community that's going to keep coming back and that you can count on?
But it is a necessary evil, and it is a full-time job to create content, and it costs money, and time is also money. So if you spend, if you've allocated 3 hours out of your day to bank content, that could turn into 7 because you're trying to figure out how to edit a reel or something silly. But it is something that is important for, I think, people to pay attention to and to invest into, as far as they understand where their audience actually lives and wants to experience them and how they want to experience them. But content is the most important thing over everything else right now.
But tying that back to one of your earlier points, Fab, in that, okay, press might not be as much of a bang for your buck as it used to be.
Yeah, it's not a needle mover with fans.
Right,
Yeah.
and so then, but formerly that role was a lot about storytelling, and people are like, okay, well, I still want to tell my story. How do I do that? By socials or whatever. Is there a balance here that they can strike and still kind of communicating who they are, what the story is, what the vibe of the release is, without pouring too much money into it?
I guess it just depends. You'd have to manage your expectations, because you can find people that will do PR for you within a certain number, right? Like a high-end 5-star PR agency will run you, I don't know, minimum $5,000 a month, which is like a serious investment for anybody, even no matter what level you're on. But you can find folks that will help you sort of craft, and understand like press blasts and sending out a press release. fielding requests that may come in, looking out for some of the more tastemaker outlets that people are paying attention to, and maybe communicating with the trades. Yes, that is important to do, especially around the time of an actual release. You want to give any PR person at least 6 to 8 weeks prior to your release to actually set it up, right? To get people aware in those spaces. But I'm not saying it's a make or break thing either. Like, yes, you have to publicize it so that you have a narrative, so that as people discover you, they can be like, oh yeah, this is the person that, you know, they came from a broken home and da-da-da, whatever. But it's not necessarily going to translate to, as Robbie says, it's not going to mean like, well, I was featured in Billboard and now I've jumped 500,000 listeners on Spotify. I think that's also kind of can be a little bit of a disconnect. Like if you have a viral moment on socials or you're a press darling, but it's not translating always into people consuming your music or your content. So I guess there's not an exact science to it, but it can get very expensive if you have really high expectations and it doesn't actually translate to a return in a financial way.
Instagram a lot. I really like Instagram. I love Instagram sometimes, although the algorithm is challenging now, but all of the algorithms are. I think that your point about press was really good, and you know, speaking as a press darling, it's true, or former press darling, it doesn't necessarily translate to listeners in the way that it did 5-10 years ago, and the people who you want to reach are probably no longer reading music blogs in the way that they might have been. So I think it's accepting that, and I also think that what's challenging about social media, especially with TikTok and now Instagram as it responds to TikTok, you're constantly encouraged to chase trends or chase sounds and think about ways to get on a wave that's already happening. And I think that can be really inauthentic for artists. Sometimes maybe you're not a public-facing person, maybe you don't engage with social media in that way. And I think that in the way that press was about or is about storytelling, to your point, it's good to figure out how do I tell my story, which is not even how do I share my biography, but it's like how do I explain or share who I am and what my perspective on the world is through this channel. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. And so I think before people move into a space of advertising, even independent artists advertising your work through social media or putting paid spend into it, it's good to develop your voice and figure out what your authentic voice with social media is, what your perspective is that you're trying to share visually, sonically. And the more authentic you are able to be, authentic to yourself, I think the more you can resonate with an audience. And so that's what I'm trying to find now.
I think what I would like to see change or evolve is, or come back to, is just more investment across the industry in artist development and artist sustainability. Because now that everything to a certain extent is kind of democratized and like anybody can make music on their laptop and like throw it up, put it out, it takes years to figure out who you are as an artist, and as you evolve and as your sounds evolve, and it's like everything shouldn't just be about, well, how will this song work within an algorithm? You know, it's crazy to think that you're only working on your third album right now, right? Like you've been at this for over a decade and you're amazing. And like there are so many artists that we all love and appreciate. Like I miss albums, you know, like an album is out and I'm gonna sit and live with this album, and now it's like DSPs will be like, well, why put out the album? Just put out singles, you know, like the way that you've said that the music, the actual art is so commodified. And it would just be nice to see the major corporations that are making so much money because we're buying their products to listen to the music, invest back in ways that the artists can keep going.
I think that we need to retrain consumers and ourselves as consumers to value music. Like clearly the government doesn't value art, but also we are so used to music being free that we need to kind of think about it. Like if you want, there are so many other industries that we engage with that we like accept that we'll have to pay if we want it. If you want a piece of clothing, you're gonna have to pay for it. If you want to try this piece of this like food, you're gonna have to go find it. And I think we have to think about artists as small business owners that we're ultimately supporting. And I think that artists should start more and more to develop a direct to consumer relationship with their audiences as they're able to find them, because a lot of the companies that we rely on to communicate, even Instagram, like the people can't even see what you're saying now who want to see it. Like if you like an artist, you go listen to them on Spotify. It's like they're not really getting that money either. And so I think starting to develop a direct to consumer relationship with your audience, take them to your website to buy your merch, encourage them to buy tickets to your show in a way that's not through Ticketmaster. I think that's the best way to get the most money out of what you're doing. And as a person who loves music, really think about buying the music that you like instead of just streaming it and on a really kind of person-to-person cultural basis. I think that that'll be the best way for artists to start to make more money from what they're putting out, and for audiences to actually own the thing that they like instead of just depending on an algorithm or a social media site or streaming to feed it to them.
All right, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you guys for coming. And follow the Rising Artists Foundation and UMAW on socials, mailing list, all that stuff. And we do these once a month. So come to the next one. Thank you.